After a recent motherboard upgrade, my beloved ASRock B450 Pro 4 motherboard was left on a shelf collecting dust. That's the only excuse I needed to start a new PC flip. I rescued an abandoned power supply from my closet and began the search for parts. After looking for deals on Ryzen CPUs, both new and used, I found a Ryzen 7 3800X listed for $100 on Marketplace. It was listed over a month ago, so I offered $80 and the seller accepted. It was only used for about 2 years and was in great condition. The included Wraith Prism cooler was brand new, which is a nice bonus. With Black Friday coming up, I was hoping to find some good deals on parts for the rest of the build. That is when I discovered the Newegg shop on the TikTok app. They were offering insane Black Friday deals for new customers. Having never used TikTok before, it was quite the moral dilemma. Was it worth giving all of my information to TikTok in exchange for discounted hardware? Considering all other options, the deals were too good to pass up. I was able to snag 32 gigs of Team Group Vulcan Z 3200 MHz RAM for only $37. For storage, I got a Solidigm P41 Plus 2TB SSD for $41, a killer deal. And last but certainly not least, I was able to get a Gigabyte Eagle RX 6600 for only $141. Nearly $50 off its usual price. These are extraordinary deals that you just can't find anywhere else, and without them, it would be hard to turn a profit on this build. The last thing I needed was a nice case to tie it all together. Through their normal website, Newegg was selling the Fantex Eclipse G300A with 3 RGB fans for only $45 after a $10 mail-in rebate. I never got around to sending in the rebate, but at $55, it is hard to find a better deal on a quality case from a name brand. The case is a compact mid-tower. Not too big, but also still easy to build in. The 3 front RGB fans look much better than the cheap fans budget cases usually come with, and the mesh front panel provides plenty of airflow. I started the build by inserting the CPU and installing the Wraith Prism cooler. The factory-applied thermal paste was still on the cooler, showing it was never used. These coolers are pretty straightforward to install, but it can be tricky hooking the clips on if you've never done it before. It's good to have extra thermal paste in case you mess up and have to redo it. Next, I added the SSD and RAM. I then installed the motherboard into the case. These fans are PWM, so I hooked them directly to the motherboard. I used the included adapter to connect the ARBG into the motherboard. This is a nice benefit from a budget case to have PWM and ARGB. The case didn't come with a fan for exhaust, so I used a cheap Rosewill 120mm fan I had laying around. The case was easy to work in and had plenty of cable management available. With the PC assembled, it was time for the moment of truth.
Yay! It works!
I did have to adjust the RGB wire a little and connect one of the fans I missed. All the hardware seemed to be working, but I couldn't get out of the BIOS. The Solidigm SSD was not showing up. After some quick research online, I found out that ASRock B450 boards have trouble with Solidigm SSDs not being detected. I tried updating the BIOS to 2 different versions and neither worked. I then looked at the support page and QVL for storage, only to find that this SSD is not on the list. They also have a technical notice showing certain models that were unsupported due to a pin issue. This was a big disappointment and honestly the first time I have had any type of issue with this board in over 3 years. I paid only $60 for it and it handled everything I threw at it, including an upgrade from a Ryzen 5 3600 to a 5700X. Luckily for me, I was able to swap the P41 Plus 2TB with my Intel 670P 2TB which is basically just an older version of the same drive. The Intel 2TB works fine on the ASRock board, so I was surprised the P41 Plus didn't. Since I just upgraded my motherboard to the Asus B550F, I was able to use the P41 in there without an issue. With everything sorted out, it was now time for stress testing. I ran it through my usual test that includes Cinebench R23 and Furmark at the same time. This maxes out both the CPU and GPU simultaneously to provide the worst case scenario. The Wraith Prism CPU cooler left room for improvement, as it was getting into the 80s during this extreme testing. But this is within spec and did not cause any throttling. While the temps are high, it is acceptable for a gaming PC since it won't see these types of loads often. On the other hand, the GPU was quite impressive. The Gigabyte Eagle 6600 performed very well with its 3-fan design, staying below 70 degrees at all times. I didn't expect a budget model to perform this well, but since it only uses 100 watts, the cooling is more than sufficient. Next, I tested the performance in Fortnite to get a baseline gaming performance. It was averaging around 100 FPS with high settings and well over 200 FPS in performance mode. With benchmarking out of the way, it was now time to sell the PC. So I took some pictures and listed it on Marketplace. If you include the price I paid for the new motherboard, I spent a total of $430 on this PC. I decided to list it at $600 in hopes of making $170 and getting a free motherboard upgrade for my personal rig. I thought this was fair pricing considering some of the other PCs listed on Marketplace. Most PCs in a similar price range had older hardware, less storage space, and only 16 gigs of RAM. And if you were to buy all the parts in this build at their normal prices, this PC would cost over $600 and you'd still have to build it yourself. But as usual, I started receiving a barrage of lowball offers. Luckily, I was in no rush to sell this PC, so I had the leverage to hold my ground. Listing it just 5 days before Christmas did leave me wondering if I would have trouble selling it if it didn't sell before the holiday passed. But it turned out not to be an issue, as I received just as much interest after Christmas as I did before. After finding an interested buyer, I set up a time to meet and prepared the PC for sale. As the meeting time came and went, no one showed up, and I received no notice from the buyer. I then went back through my messages and let the other interested parties know that it had not sold. I set up another meeting for the next day, and once again, I was met with another no-show. I checked the chat only to find that the buyer had left the chat without saying anything. I just don't understand these people. If you don't want to buy the item, or can't make it, at least have the basic decency to let the seller know. The next day, I received another inquiry and made sure they were serious. I told them I was having trouble with no-shows, and they assured me they would be there. Finally, a buyer showed up, and he turned out to be a nice 70-year-old man who was looking to play Flight Simulator on his new VR. He said he tried to hook it up to his 10-year-old computer, and it would not work. The PC was exactly what he was looking for, and I was glad to help someone who didn't know much about PC hardware get a good deal. This was a happy ending to another mixed experience selling on Facebook Marketplace. I've come to expect lowball offers, but one guy went a little too far. After I sold the PC for asking price, he left me a 1-star rating for bad pricing because I refused to accept his $400 offer. For this reason, I think you should only be able to rate someone after completing a transaction. With that out of the way, another successful PC flip comes to an end. I was able to make $170 profit and earn a free motherboard upgrade for my PC. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you on the next project.